Hello and welcome to The More the Merrier with Donna G on CIUT 89.5 FM, University of Toronto Radio. Today's show has a film and theater focus. Later on in the show, I'll be speaking with artistic and executive director Catherine Bourgeois of Joe, Jack et John. The company is out of Montreal and they perform works that are creative collaboratively, and they are inclusive of professional artists of functional diversity, notably neurodivergent artists and artists with intellectual disabilities. Their play, Cis-Personnages en quête d'autrice, will be playing at Theatre Passe Muraille, and it is a co-production of Théâtre Français de Toronto and Theatre Passe Muraille and Joe, Jack, and John. The show runs April 24th to 27th at Passe Muraille, and it is a comedy, so you won't want to miss hearing about that. But at first, I'll be talking to film and television director Nick Sexton and Canadian Screen Award nominee Sean Dalton. If Sean's name sounds familiar, he was a drummer for the Trews. They both joined me a couple of days ago to talk about SKEET, a film set in St. John's, Newfoundland. The description reads, fresh out of prison, Billy Skinner returns to his transformed low-income neighborhood, now populated by Syrian refugees. Struggling to overcome his dark past, Billy forges an unexpected bond with Mo, a compassionate Syrian immigrant determined to build a better life for his family. The film is currently on tour and will be playing for one night only. On April 16th, it will be screening at the Royal Theatre in Toronto with Nick and Sean in attendance. I had a great time chatting with the guys earlier this week. Here now is that interview. Nick, this is your second feature film. Why did you choose to shoot SKEET in black and white?
We started shooting the film about 7 years ago, and we did a lot of tests, like character tests. And when we shot those, we tried them in color, we tried them in black and white, and we just found that black and white told the story better. We found that when we were much more engaged when we watched the story, scenes in black and white. And then when we came back to it, we made a hard decision to shoot black and white. So we lit for black and white. And I think when we watch this film in 10 years, it will feel timeless.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So the idea of SKEET, the name of the film, first of all, for listeners who don't know what SKEET is, what does that mean?
Well, I'll let Sean talk about it since he talks about it in the film. Sean, you want to handle this one?
Yeah, a skeet is like it was kind of a nickname that we have here in Newfoundland for kind of like the Newfie tough guys. The Billy Skinner character is um, he's kind of he's a delicate blend of a bunch of people that we knew and grew up with that were uh, terrifying, but at the same time, kind of they had a code and they you looked up to them in an odd way. It's a very kind of maybe Irish Catholic, way where it's like these guys, like the Whitey Bulgers. I mean, not to that extreme, but there was something people in that town like that Whitey Bulger. So yeah, so that Skeet is kind of a Newfie tough guy that we're hopefully we fleshed out in the character Billy.
Now, Nick, I've heard you say in previous interviews that I've seen that the word SKEET is kind of a little controversial. Some people like it, some people don't. What's the take around that?
Well, yeah, skeet has different meanings all around the world. If you look it up, there's some controversial meanings about skeet in certain parts of the U.S. And yeah, I think in where we grew up, Sean and I grew up in St. John's. A skeet is kind of considered, like Sean said, like a Newfoundland tough guy, but kind of a lower class person as well, or skeets. Kind of associated with small crime, lower crime, or small crime types, and someone that's probably associated with recidivism, going in and out of jail, for petty crimes. And I think it's controversial because, some people might ask, why are you telling stories about skeets? It's what hasn't been done, I don't think, to this extent in Newfoundland cinema. So, yeah, I think that it's controversial because, but I think it's also strikes a chord, and I think it sparks curiosity. If you talk to anyone in Newfoundland or on the streets of St. John's, everyone could do a Skeet impersonation for you. You know, they could they
Okay.
because as like Sean said, we feared these people, but we also kind of love to watch them. We love, a reality show where you're like, I would never hang out with that person, but I'm dying to see what they do next. That's kind of what a Skeet, what quote Skeets are like. And when Sean and I started breaking down this character, we sort of had a few people in mind, like you said, a blend of people we grew up with. So but ultimately we wanted it to be about redemption and someone that you would root for, that had a big heart.
It took you 7 years to make this film. Why so long? Was it budget, timing?
Bit of both. We were still developing the characters early on, like we said, like we did those character tests. We went away for a while. Sean and I had our differences on the story, and then we came back to each other, and then we went away again, and we came back to each other. So I think initially it was about trying to shoot these tests to sort of find the story a little bit, and then we went to these neighborhoods, and I've said this a few times, with these neighborhoods to film where the Skeet Billy Skinner lives. We found that there was all these Middle Eastern refugees living in these low-income neighborhoods in St. John's, and that sparked a new story in the film, or a new storyline for the film, and then that set us on a different path. So I think the film evolved over 7 years, as well as like the story and the technical aspects, and Sean and our mine relationship evolved as well.
So how long was the shooting?
Uh, Sean and I shot those character tests 7 years ago. I think we shot, for a week then. It was just a very small skeleton crew. And then we shot periodically in 2022, 2023. So we shot in, I think, three different sections, Sean. I think we shot like spring,
Yep.
summer, and winter. I think because it's about this friendship between Billy and Mo, and we didn't want it to feel like a week in the summer, like watch some movies, it feels like fast friends, and everyone's wearing the same clothes the whole time. um so we saw this story evolve over seasons, because I think that's interesting in cinema. When you see seasons go by, you're like, wow, they really are friends. They really, you believe it more, right? And you got to believe it. So yeah, I think we shot four different times over 7 years.
Okay. Sean, this is your first movie ever. What made you say yes to acting as the lead character?
Nick. This is Nick's baby. I mean, this is all Nick's idea. We were always throwing ideas at each other, but Nick had the seed of this thing in his pocket somewhere, and we were both living in Toronto, and he's like, "Hey, man, he said, can you act like this particular type of person?" I guess he saw something in me that he thought was, you know, there, and yeah, he just we just started, using his phone and just jamming on things and trying out different characters, and then we were like, we might actually have something here. We might actually be able to pull this off. So as much as I'd like to take the credit, you know, this is uh this is Nick's baby.
Take the credit. What the hell? Take the credit.
I'll take the awards, money. I mean, so
Take the credit because
Sean's being humble here. This Sean it's not just, we're doing a comedy series right now, and Sean is also in the comedy series. And let me tell you, he's more than just Billy Skinner. This guy can do comedy and drama.
yeah, because I believed you. I believed Billy Skinner in the film. And to find out, I read the words and I'm like, I'm sure this guy's done some short films and maybe this is his feature. So, Sean, please do take the credit and tell me how you related to this character so to be able to bring him to the screen so realistically.
well, we grew up with a lot of guys that were like this guy. So I've been kind of watching this guy I've kind of had my eye on this guy my whole life. So, and in Newfoundland, growing up here, if you can do impressions of people and you can do comedic versions, or if you can, comedy is kind of king, and acting, and there's a huge the culture in Newfoundland is unbelievable. So if you can jam with your buddies and pull it off, you're onto something. And even with my own struggles with drugs and alcohol over the years, that probably bled its way into being able to, you know, truly understand, not the way a doctor understands, but truly understand how this stuff affects you and how it can tear your life apart and what it's like to build back up and to come out smelling like a rose, out of a pile of manure, so to speak.
But what was it like for you you mentioned, the acting in real life, but it's a different thing when you have to act with cameras around. So what was that like for you initially?
It was well, and again, like I was kind of coming off a long, 25 year, we'll say 8 year, drug and alcohol bender. So I mean, it was surreal. Like I wasn't doing great during the shooting of this movie, and maybe some of that bled through. It wasn't, like, between my wife and Tammy out there and Nick, kind of cheering me on and whispering things into my ear, and I probably wouldn't have done it. I just wasn't. I was, nowhere near my best. So it was daunting at first. And then I was just like, well, I guess I just have to lean into it. If you're a mess, lean into it. Be a mess. If you're a train wreck, then lean into the train wreck. If you're angry, lean into the anger. You know, if you're scared, lean into the fear.
But technically, in terms of, you know, doing retakes, because I'm sure it wasn't one scene every take. So what was that like for you, just as a regular guy having to say the same words multiple times?
I like your questions. You must be in theater or something, are you?
No.
These are good. These are good. I like these. I love these kind of questions because it's the stuff I love. I don't know. It's well, I would pace and repeat the lines, and Tammy and I would read the lines together. Nick and I would read lines. I get pretty obsessed with stuff. If I get something in my head, it rips me to shreds not being able to do it. If I have an idea in my head, if it's something for something artful or something musical or something, it literally haunts me until I can think of nothing else. So like if we're doing that, I want it to be like going to the gym or something else. I want it to be, it has to be great, or I don't see the point.
Nick, were there any times where Sean pissed you off where he goes, "No, I can go again. I can go again."
That's a great question. I'm trying to recall here now.
Many
Uh,
times it pissed them off.
yeah, no. There was times, if I recall, Sean and Tammy came early, and we had a little office downtown. We had the luxury of having time on our side for prep. And in prep, we scheduled a few weeks of rehearsals, and we actually had the liberty of having, or the privilege of having, the locations at our fingertips, like for some of these, because we shot it all, on real locations. So we would just go rehearse, and by the time we got going, I think Sean was already Billy in a way. He was already Billy, and like he said, what I love about working with Sean is, like he said, he takes it very seriously. Some actors, you call cut, they check their phone, what's for lunch, what's going on. Not Sean. Sean is programmed. If he's in something, he is giving it 120%, and he's already studying the next scene, what he's going to do with the next scene. So we had the liberty of rehearsals, and we just cared. Everyone cared. Everyone was on board for this film, and I think that just shows.
I love the fact that this is a redemption story about, low income people struggling um, economically and also with the drug scene. But there is hope. I didn't want to see, my fear going into this film was that I was going to see another drug film, with somebody with a needle in their arm and that would be the end of the movie.
Yeah,
And this, I was so rooting for Billy because, I was raised in Toronto, Scarborough in particular, and I grew up with some of these guys who you'd call skeet,
Yep.
and I would be friends with them, and my friends would say, "Why are you friends with those guys?" And I said, "Because with me they're nice." You know, it's like, meanwhile, next day they'll go beat somebody up, and and so I knew people like Billy, and so I was, rooting for Billy, um, to be a sense of hope, for the guys that I knew that didn't make it, and for those who might be watching, who are gonna feel away, see themselves in Billy. So in terms of your writing, was it always going to be a redemptive film from the beginning, or did that change as you said you got to locations and some things changed?
No, I think the genesis of the Billy character was always redemption. It was always like Sean said, like, and you just finished saying that people would question why you're hanging out with these people, but you're always kind of rooting for them. And I think I think from day one it was a little bit of redemption. I think we wanted the audience to root for Billy. He's not like Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, in that you find him an asshole, he ends in it ends as him an asshole, he doesn't learn nothing. No, there's redemptive qualities in Billy, and I think when you think of the Billies in your life, those tough guys that probably saw too much violence, domestic violence in their homes, or had to fight their way out of their neighborhoods. I think most of us know that they didn't have a choice in that, and they often have a big heart, and they often don't want to be around that, but it's programmed in their coding, because they just they just grew up around it. And so I think that Sean and I knew enough of these guys that we were rooting for those guys, and we wanted that to carry through in the film, that the audience would be rooting for these guys. And I know what you mean about rooting and then thinking that, oh God, this is going to end badly. And I'm glad you felt that way, because that's the way we want you to feel.
Yeah. And I'm not giving too much away when I
Oh,
talk about the ending, because the film is so rich. Why is this a neo-noir?
I think it's a neo noir because, well, I'll tell you why. Sean and I grew up in Newfoundland, which is predominantly known for jelly bean saturated row houses and beautiful cinematic ocean landscapes, and we wanted to turn the camera inward and point it up toward a population that doesn't get much shine.
Sean, the refugees in the area of the film, were you familiar with the refugee situation before filming? Was this a side of St. John's that you knew about?
It was a side that I knew about, but I didn't know how. When Nick came to, like, when we first kind of started jamming on this, uh, I was just thinking, let's make it like a knockdown, like ultra violent, kind of like The Departed style. That was just where my head was. And he came with this whole other thing, and I was thinking, well, that's a great story. And only when we got here to start filming I was like, oh, this really is what's going on here. Like, this is really happening here. I had no idea. Like, I knew, but I didn't know. And when I got here, it was like, oh, this is the real deal. Drugs are a problem here. There are new people here. Um, there's a story here. That was again, gotta hand it over to Nick for that one. That was
Yeah, I
not what
think
I was thinking, but it's certainly, I'm super happy now with everybody coming in. Anybody that's seen it, and it's all snot and tears, and it's like, okay, this was, best idea wins.
yeah.
Nikki,
There was something in that, like, when we were writing and we were like rehearsing, was that we keep going back to is these two guys that you think would have nothing in common have so much more in common than we imagine, and are both in unfortunate in unfortunate situations in their lives, and they find each other at this moment, and they have shared trauma, and they can actually relate with their trauma, and it's much closer than we think, and we often see those Billies and the Mo types that live next to each other thinking they have nothing in common, when really they do. Yeah, and
Oh yeah.
I think that shines through in the film. I like to think it does anyway.
I think it was Jay Abdo said to me, he said something like, after one of the screenings, was like, he's like, Billy is like a refugee within himself, something along those lines. I'm kind of ruining it, but basically, this guy can't get out of himself. This guy can't. This guy's like a refugee in his own body that seems to just be stuck in this. He's running and he can't get anywhere. It's like a treadmill.
Yeah.
Jay Abdo in the role of Muhammad, a Syrian refugee who is in the same street, the courts with Billy. Uh, I love the story, hearing your story, Nick, of doing a shoot, a scene, and people would come and take selfies with with Jay. Please
Oh yeah.
introduce the audience to Jay Abdo, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah. Jay Abdo was recommended by our story consultant Iyad Sakar and his father. And we didn't know who he was at first. And his real name is Jihad Abdo, and he came from Syria. He found himself as a refugee. He had to flee for his life due to the Assad government, and was in Los Angeles rebuilding his life again. So I think in many ways Jay, could see Mo and could see Billy in himself, and then he worked his way up to delivering pizzas for Domino's, to in a Nicole Kidman film directed by Werner Herzog, in a Tom Hanks film. So Jay did the rebuild himself, and when Jay got the script, we were like, he'll never come down and do this. And I was telling Sean, but Sean was focusing on becoming Billy, right? And I was just, so this was kind of happening peripheral in the background. I'm like, we got this guy Jay. He's big. He's a big deal in the Middle East, like one of the biggest working actors in the Middle East. And he's starting. He's got this Beverly Hills agent, and he said yes to come down to do it. We were taken, we're blown away. He's going to do it. And he comes down, and Sean's like, I didn't realize how big of a deal he was until he showed up on set. And Sean's like, people are bringing their babies out for him to kiss them, and cars would drive in, and in the middle of takes, we'd be there, and someone would just walk on set, like we're in the middle of shooting, and they just like FaceTime their buddy with Jay there, going, hey, and they're like, there's just constantly photo, and he's so good about it, and he really is a lot like who he is, like Mo in a way, like he's very kind with his time. He's a true artist. And wow, I don't have anything but really great things to say about him. And he and Sean rehearsed, so many times, and he's just a tremendous human being. And now he's back in Syria, in Damascus right now. Like, I mean, since the film has wrapped, he thought he'd never go home again. He and his wife Fadia, and now that Assad is gone, he's going back, and he's helping with the Syrian rebuild right now.
Wow. Sean, what was it like for you acting with an established actor?
He made it easier on me, you know what I mean? Because I think what he's really good at is space, and timing. I think that's what a lot of that acting is just, just taking a breath and giving the other person space. And he gave me all the space I needed. So, it was, if it was someone else with my kind of hyper crazy energy, it might not have, who knows? But with that guy, it was just like, it was like jazz or something. It was just like, it just flowed.
Yeah, you two have the chemistry, which is why the film works. If there was any sort of, oh, these guys don't really fit, then, the story would have fallen apart. What were those rehearsal periods like for you, Sean, in terms of being with Jay?
They were, well, I mean, when Nick would yell cut, it's like we just go back to like, yeah, so like, he's like, is Tim Hortons really good? And I was like, actually, it's it's okay. It's like, and when we just go into jamming about like, and I was like, so they're like Christians in like Syria, like how does that work? He was like, there's tons of Christians in Syria. We'd just be jamming about, it was like two old buddies watching the ball game in their 90s kind of thing. And I was just like, oh yeah. So anyway, it was like we go back to like we were really interested in yakking because I wanted like this guy's story, my story and his background story are every bit as crazy as the film.
Yeah, exactly. And sticking with you, Sean, what was it like being a dad in the film?
I felt well. I remember my wife Tammy and I sitting down when we watched the very first kind of completed version of that Nick sent to us, and by the end of it, I was just thinking, God, I feel bad for this guy. I didn't realize that what a dumpster fire this guy's life was. Like when I saw it all, kind of perfectly put together. I mean, again, shout out to Nick and the editing. And watching this guy and his son was, I mean, it was heartbreaking. There was a scene where I think it's my nephew Jackson, who's the son, and we're going down an escalator together, and I drunkenly put my arm around him, and he just very naturally just casts it, like pushes it off.
Yeah.
and he's a good, great natural actor too. And so he did that, and I was just like, woof, ouchie.
Yeah, exactly.
Hard to watch.
Nick, how did you get Kate Corbett?
Um, I had done a film, the first film I'd done, the How to Be Deadly. She had a small part in that, and Kate and I both living in Toronto at the time, and when I was thinking about making this film and then talking with Sean, we had to think about Leah and who she was, and yeah, and Kate. I'd seen Kate in The Righteous. She was nominated for a CSA for that, and she was in a bunch of other films. And I'd gone to her screens, and we always kept in touch. And she had like Sean had a hit on who Billy was. Kate had a hit on who Leah was. Like she had someone in her life that or again, a blend of people. So when we had these conversations, it just felt natural to cast her. And I think she really appreciated it because there was no audition process with Kate. I just knew she could do it. She had the chops, she had the experience, and it's funny because you mentioned the chemistry with Billy and Mo and how the film wouldn't work without it. And it's like the same goes with Leah and Billy. And you're often watching that in rehearsal. Like, did I, you're asking, did we make the right decision in casting? Is this going to work? And when you're watching in rehearsal, you're like, well, everyone flew in. We're doing this thing, right? So, and sometimes the film gods just step up and they bless you, and you go, thank you. The chemistry on both sides worked. So, Kate was Kate was just a blessing, and again, just like Sean said with space, Kate has that training in her life as well. I think to know when a breath is coming, know when to slow down, because there's a lot of discipline with theater actors. But I think part of the reason of Sean's natural acting being so good as well is timing from music. I've worked with a lot of musicians turned actors, and I will say that they have a great sense of timing, and that's invaluable.
Sean, what did you learn from Kate?
What I learned recently, when we finally saw her scene at the end, I learned very quickly. I was like, oh, there's levels to this stuff too. Like whenever I see other people that are really great, at something, I don't really notice it when they're not so great, but when they do something really great, it's like, well, how do we? That's something else. Yeah, hanging out with someone like that's a professional actor. You learn quick. I love hanging out with people that are good at what they do. I
Yeah,
find that amazing. To me, it's like, well, who's great at something? I don't care what it is. If
yeah,
somebody's good at something, I'm interested.
yeah. They make you better.
100%.
Nick, I just wanted to express my appreciation for this film, and it's about the two guys, Billy and Mo. But you also have some great women characters in this film. Billy's mother is not left out. She's incredible. Mo's wife is not left out. She has very few lines, but her facial expressions are wonderful. And the character of Leah, I got Leah.
Yeah.
Um, I got her, again, reminding me of some of the girls that, I grew up with. And things happen to them. And I like the fact that you gave some screen time to women, and this wasn't just the two guys learning. Why was it important for you to include the women?
I think in the writing process, my mother's a producer in the film. My mother's a strong woman. I grew up around a lot of my grandmother was a very strong woman, and I didn't want these female characters that just serve the men. And I think there's a really important storyline and theme around the foster care system here. My mom was a single mom. She had me when she was 17. So I had that to connect with Leah, because that's sort of Leah's story a little bit, with and there's some personal stuff in there, and yeah, but I wanted all the characters, the whole cast, not just Billy and Mo or the women. I want everyone to be, three dimensional in a way. I wanted everyone to have, all the characters to evolve and what they learned. So they all, like Fadia in the doorway with Billy. She's a strong Syrian mother. She's a strong, she stands up for her son. to Billy, who she doesn't know, is a killer.
Yeah.
And we talked about that at length, myself and Mira Hamor and Iyad and Jay. Like when they're in the living room and Mo is saying, do you know, my wife is not just a great cook, she's also working to get her optometry credentials. That's forward thinking for a Muslim Syrian man to say, and we wanted to push those things as well, for that culture. Like we wanted to push those narratives that there are these men that are evolving, and that love their wives and kiss their wives in public and shout out their wives. So I think we talked about that time and time again when developing the characters, and I'm so proud of performances. Wendy Smallwood as the mom is phenomenal. Yeah, Kate Corbett's phenomenal. I'm so proud of everyone in the film. Yeah.
Sean, you've been nominated for awards for this role. Will you do more drama?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for me, it's like this is, I played drums in a rock band for 14 years, and my ears have taken a beating, and my body took a beating on the road. And this, comparatively, this is like a new interest, and I don't know anything about this yet. So that to me is fascinating. I knew something about the music industry. I don't know anything about this, and that to me is exciting. So like if there's more that comes my way, let's do it.
There are so many more questions I could ask in this interview, but we're running out of time. And I just want to thank you both for joining me today to give a little bit of insight into the making of SKEET. And thank you so much for joining me.
You were awesome.
Thank you. It was fantastic.
I feel like I already know you. I was just sitting here the whole time just drinking coffee. This is so relaxed.
And that was my chat with Nick Sexton and Sean Dalton about SKEET, playing one night only, April 16th at the Royal in Toronto. Get your tickets at theroyal.to. That's theroyal.to. Click on events. Age requirement is 16 plus, and tickets are $15. The Royal is located at 608 College Street, right here in Toronto. Doors open at 6 p.m. The event starts at 7. And again, theroyal.to, click on events. I'm going to play the trailer from SKEET so you can have a listen. And then after that, I'll be back with the artistic and executive director of Joe, Jack, and John, Joe, Jack, et John, to talk about Cispersonnages en quête d'autrice. Catherine Bourgeois will be joining me.
Not the same since you were gone, Billy.
You're out there, eh? Good to see you, bud.
Next stop, the court.
Good to have you back, I said. How you been?
It's Billy. Mohammed. How long? That's 3 years of hard time. Dude, look at you. I saw your son. Ah, Hamza. He's really something. Did you teach him how to do that, or?
I teach him discipline. Anyone can be good, but not everyone has discipline.
You remember Gus?
What is SKEET about?
I guess a SKEET is it's like a tough guy.
Yeah?
They just act tough. Skeet's not that tough. I've been called a skeet.
You're a tough guy?
The old man used to say the Skinner name was cursed. Listen, you're a Skinner. They don't make them like us anymore. You know why I was away, right?
Yeah.
And what do you think of that?
Would you do it again?
Curated by the people, for the people. CIUT 89.5 FM is the sound of your city.
Théâtre Français de Toronto is proud to co-present Joe, Jack et John's Cispersonnages en quête d'autrice with Theatre Passe Muraille. The show will run from April 24th to 27th at Theatre Passe Muraille, 16 Ryerson Avenue, right here in Toronto. The description reads, a troupe of professional actors finds itself in a rehearsal hall working on a new play. In order to overcome the creative block bogging them all down, each of them throws out scenario after scenario, idea after idea. Catherine Bourgeois joined me a couple of days ago. She's the artistic and executive director of Joe, Jack, and John to talk about this play. And forgive me when I stumble on the word autrice during my interview. Here now is my chat with Catherine Bourgeois. Catherine, how long has Joe, Jack, and John been around? And why did you start it?
Joe, Jack, and John has been around for 22 years. And so we started it in Montreal in 2003. I was just finishing my degrees in theater. And we wanted to create a company that would work in co-creation, like collective writing, devising, and all of that, in collaboration with artists with disabilities, like intellectual disabilities. There's a school in Montreal called the Muses, which is a school for neurodivergent artists to become professional actors. And I had seen the work of Pippo Del Bono and Romeo Castellucci, which are two Italian directors and who work with actors of different abilities. And I had gotten really inspired by that. And the fact that we had a school in Montreal was like, oh, everything was coming together. So we started the company just with the idea of like making one performance, one project. And then after another one came up, another one, and then here we go. The rest is history in the sense that we've been now like more established company in the Montreal scene.
I've never heard of the Muses. I'll have to look them up. Thank you so much for that introduction.
Yeah, it's a great school. It's quite innovative in the sense that like there's no equivalent, I think, in the rest of Canada. And even in Europe, I haven't met any kind of like school like that. So thanks to that school, we can be Joe, Jack, and John. Like, I mean, because the whole ecosystem is kind of interdepending on each other.
And do you remember the first production that you put on?
Of course, yeah.
And how was that?
It was tiny. It was two actors. It was a two-ender. So one actress coming from Les Muses named Geneviève, and Pascal, another actress that I had studied with. And it was called When I Was an Animal, Quand j'étais un animal. And it was built around the taxidermy manual. So it was about like feminism, bodies, growing up as women, and it was a tiny stage in a bar. And we had a stuffed wolf on stage and a line of mice. Right, that's it.
Okay. So jump forward to now.
Yeah.
And JJ and Jay, is putting on the play Cispersonnages en quête d'autrice.
That's it. Very well done. Well
D'autrice.
done. Well done. Yeah.
Merci,
Yeah,
merci.
very good. Yeah.
So, six people in search of a playwright. So tell me about that play, please.
This play, we started the creation of that play during the pandemic. So we started like through Zooms and Zoom meetings and gatherings. So there was right from the get-go, there was a need to reinvent the process so we could co-create through like computers without being in a room. And so accessibility in terms of like digital accessibility is quite challenging for us. So there was a whole like setup of like, okay, accessing each other. And so we started talking about subjects that are, I mean, in our global walk towards a more inclusive society, there's all kind of subject and debates that arouse around like appropriation, consent, and cancel culture or and privileges. And so I had this kind of like feeling that those subjects, although wanting to be very inclusive, were rather exclusive to my colleagues in the sense that the vocabulary is shifting quickly and the notion are quite niche. So the first part of the process was really like to make those concepts like privilege, what does it mean? And accessible consent, what is that? Appropriation, what? I mean, and to make those concepts accessible, intellectually accessible to my colleagues so we could devise a play around that. And it's really like a play about the art of making art and how we have to navigate this notion of like living together in a more inclusive society, but the shortfalls or the kind of the shadows of certain of those conversation. And that's it. It turns out to be a comedy. So
Okay.
like a woke comedy. And
Uh-huh.
and it's quite slippery, but we are having a good time, quite a lot of fun doing that show.
Now, in terms of working with neurodiverse actors, what are some of the things that you have to keep in mind?
Access is something of like every day, every hour, in terms of not only like accessing buildings or locations, but as well in terms of the transportation and all of that, but as well accessing the ideas and accessing the conversation that can happen or that will happen in the dressing room, backstage, or most importantly in the studios as well. So everybody can have access to being creators and creation. So this is really something very important in terms of like talking in plain language and always making sure that people follow and people follow in different ways and have different take on what's going on and what is said and all of that has to be part of the game and part of the kind of like brought in this kind of like big mixer that we are kind of like generating and rolling with. So I think, yeah, accessibility is the intellectual or accessibility as well as physical. And that's my main concern, let's say.
In the beginning, you must have in your head had certain expectations of what this company could be about. How has that changed over the years? What strengths have you developed since the beginning of founding JJJ?
This is a great question. I have very high expectations, but not in the sense that I have like precise expectation, but I have some kind of like utopic, idealistic expectation. And with the team, we work hard to provide the support and all the steps necessary to achieve some kind of like, yeah, some.
Is it easier now for you it's a creative process easier now because you've been doing it for so long?
It is easier now because I know more of my community and I have more confidence and I feel more legitimate, let's say, and I've developed a lot of like reflections and readings and conversation around the co-creation, interdependent. Um, it's easier now as well because 22 years ago, as you, I'm sure you know, like this notion of like inclusion, diversity, like was really like not where it is today. So in terms of like the traction we could have and in the milieu, in the community, it was very little. Like we were playing in a bar, an empty.
Yeah.
We were like, it took 8 years before we were programmed into a theater season. So it was really like difficult to just reach the actual theater venues to be accepted by the milieu. So it is easier now because of the yeah, that knowledge, that experience, that as well that we participated into the conversation, into changing mind, changing the vision of our peers, and so it's easier now. But however, like I must say that I thrive at just like always challenging ourselves and getting outside of comfort zone. So Cispersonnages was a something like that because we were like cut into like the pandemic and we were like, okay, how can we co-create and write together? And that play has a lot of text. And it's not something we used to have so much text. So it was a lot of work to learn by art and all the intention and all the work. So it was a very challenging play to develop and to work on. And the next one is as well like taking us outside of our comfort zone and like so it's always kind of like challenging and demanding, but in different ways. And that's what keeps it exciting and alive as well.
Thank you for answering that question and showing the journey of the theater, because I was wondering how accepting was the theater community in the beginning?
Because no, it wasn't very accepting because I think that by me saying, hey, I think this actor is a professional actor, it just like kind of like already like this notion of like what it is to be an artist. We're not recognized to the just to our real values. Like I mean the notion of artist, what it is. And if I come in and I say, hey, I think that these artists are professional one, it just like it scares and it make everybody rethink what it is to be a professional artist and what is it to be making professional theater. And if we're not recognized and valued, I mean, how can we think about like opening more to more diverse people and being I mean, there's fears, I guess. It's fears and it's the lack of I mean, ignorance maybe.
Yeah.
But that's a long time ago and it still exists, but it's much more difficult to be expressed publicly. It's more repressed. And and I'm fearful, obviously, right now, like a lot of people are. We are fearful of where are we going as a society, as a community, globally.
Definitely. So let's get to the play,
Oh.
Cispersonnages.
Yep.
Tell the audience more about that work, please.
So it's the story of a bunch of actors that come together to create a show. So they are neurodivergent artists, and so they gather together in order to create a show because they're not hired by other people or by other companies. So they come together, they try to make the show happen, but then they're cut into different notions of appropriation or like or freedom of speech or freedom. I mean, and so they have difficulty devising or finding an idea that they will be able to pursue. And within the group, they have like kind of few fights in terms of different viewpoints and values. And so that's the core of the play. And for us, this notion of for us as a company, Joe, Jack and John, this idea of like appropriating somebody else's life or role is one of the reasons why most of the actors we collaborate with are coming to theater. It's in order to be somebody else, to be allowed to be somebody else, and the disabled person that the society have been typecasting them. So theater is a real value is a way of getting free and being somebody else. So this notion of appropriation as being wrong and like, it's always been a bit challenging for us because everybody comes in, or I mean, wants to make theater around us to become a cowboy, a superhero, somebody else that they are. So this all current of kind of like playing who you are is very depressing, let's say, for some of my colleagues. But that's what they are doing for most of that show, and that allowed us to have great conversation of like, what can you play, who's allowed to play what, and these notions are not easy to grasp for us, but for society in general. And I think that like we're really offering a new kind of like viewpoint and a new angle in this conversation with a lot of humor and with a lot of autodérision, autodérision, it's a kind of humor that you laugh about yourself a bit.
Self-deprecating.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you. Yeah. And it's awkward, and sometimes it's oh yeah, it's destabilizing as well. But and at the end, or in the story, there's a unicorn, so there's a bit of magic and fantasy in all that feud around those intense subjects. There's magical and there's humor. And the unicorn was brought in because one of the actors was like, my dream of doing a show would be to do like a unicorn shows with like lots of unicorns. And we're like, oh, like you're not allowed to appropriate like somebody else's living experience. Like you're not a unicorn and you shouldn't play that. So we've been going far with this idea of playing unicorn, and we have a beautiful unicorn on stage.
Tell me about the actors who are in the play.
Oh, there's in the play we have 7 actors, and 4 of them are identifying as neurodivergent. It's quite a range of different abilities, and 2 of them, I mean, Edon has been collaborating with the company for 11 or 12 years, and he's associate artist with the company. So that means that he's leading and developing his own shows. And so that's a project that the company has been put on like since 2018, where some creators with intellectual disability who have like a certain level of creativity and desire to pursue their own vision are invited to develop their own plays or their own projects. So Edon is one of them, and Michael is our like old-timer. Michael is I think he's approaching 70, and he's been collaborating with the company for over 15 years. So it's a pleasure to have them both on stage with us, along with 2 rookies actors, that one from Quebec City and one from Montreal, and other seasoned artists around. So it's a really beautiful bunch of diverse abilities. And the show is performed in French because as well it's co-presented by Théâtre Français de Toronto, and there's subtitle on.
Yeah, there's subtitles. Yeah, I've been to Théâtre Français. I love going because of the subtitles. Because, you know, I took French in school, but I need the subtitles sometimes. But then sometimes I'm having so much fun just watching. I can get the context by just watching that I forget to look at the subtitles. So that's why I like telling people about TFT, because there's so many of us like me who took French in school, and you know, we never get a chance to really hear it because we live in Ontario or in Toronto, And so we don't get a chance to hear it often. So this is a good way for us. So this is accessibility for us as well. English speakers to see a different kind of to enter into a different type of theater with a different language. So accessibility is important to me too. So I love what your company is doing. And so have you been in have you co-produced with TFT before?
No, it's our first experience of collaborating with TFT, and we're really enjoying the partnership with the company.
And how did that come about?
I knew about TFT for a long time, and I was intrigued by, and we had presented some works at the Theatre Center in 2018, and again at the Arborfront Center. There was a festival in 2021 or 22. We were there with a show called Violette. So, and I was like intrigued by TFT's mandate and their seasons, and I reached out to Karine, the artistic director, and we hit it off, as you say in English, I think. And that came from there, and then just pairing with Passe Muraille, and who have similar values to us in terms of like inclusion and accessibility. So this is how it all came together.
Yeah. So JJ&J, Théâtre Français de Toronto, and Theatre Passe Muraille.
Yeah, that's it.
All together with everybody working together.
Yeah, and this show I know is like might be tricky as well for an audience of Toronto. So I'm curious to see how it's going to be received, because there's self-deprecating humor. We are like cheeky in theater in French, Quebec, in French Canada. I guess theater doesn't serve the same purpose maybe as it serves in English, in terms of like it serves to wake up, kind of like bring tough questions and have like conversation that are tough and like shake people up a bit. And that's what we do as a company when we're not patting people that much
on the back.
No, that's it. We like to shake people, and so I'm really curious to see how the crowds in Toronto will get to see our sense of humor, because as well in Quebec we've been around for many years, so people know our sense of humor, know our stance in terms of like having a political like and a second level, second degré as well of like so that's gonna be interesting to see how this is received as well by the French speaker in Toronto, but the English speaker both. Like, yeah.
Sounds exciting. And that's exactly what theater's supposed to be, challenge the audience a bit. Well, see, I like the fact that you're challenging the audience, but using humor to do it. That gets the message across stronger for me
I
when it's done that
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Catherine, it was a pleasure meeting you and speaking with you about the company, and I'm looking forward to seeing the work.
Me too. I'm looking forward to seeing Toronto and the work in it. And thank you, Donna. It was a real pleasure to discuss and chat with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For more information about Cis-characters in search of an author or playwright, or Cispersonnages en quête d'autrice, the performance again is in French with English surtitles, and you can access tickets at passemuraille.ca, PASSEMURAILLE.ca. That's www.passemuraille.ca. You're listening to The More the Merrier with Donna G on CIUT 89.5 FM, U of T Radio. Signing off now with Nax Batota and Poso Oyo. As usual, you can get in touch with me via the CIUT website, www.ciut.fm/tmtm.
Banga mamboka na bango na motoki na biso bazali kosalela bomengo oyo biso toko kufela